Thank you very much, Rory. Thank you very much for inviting me to come here this afternoon. As Rory says, my name is Malcolm Corbett, and I run an organisation called the Independent Networks Cooperative Association. Before that, a few years ago, I set up an organisation called the Community Broadband, which provided some help to communities around the country with problems with first-generation broadband. And I've called my short presentation this afternoon the division of labour in big society broadband. And really, I think what's interesting about this whole conference is the way that Rory has brought together a fantastic group of people to address the problems that face many of us around the country in very many areas, particularly rural areas. And it is a problem that confronts, around about a third of the population, as we've heard already. This, of course, is an area which has been designated one of the big society areas, and I think it's quite interesting to try to address it from that point of view, particularly when we're talking about the impact that people in communities themselves can have, and that's what I want to touch on a little bit this afternoon. I think where we start really from with this administration is Jeremy Hunt and some of the things that he's been saying and announcements he's been making. And when I actually was looking for a picture of Jeremy Hunt, I came across this, which I thought was interesting. It's one of these little sort of maps of words that have been said in speeches and how things stand out. And noticeably, it is the idea that broadband and local go very much together. And I think that is a crucial element of the thinking that's going on at the moment in government and all the way down through the system. And of course, the big issue that Jeremy Hunt has put in front of all of us is to try to have, within the space of this Parliament, the best broadband infrastructure in Europe, the best superfast broadband infrastructure in Europe, within just a few years, without actually putting a huge amount of money behind that commitment. But it's an ambition that is worth going for, as several speakers have said already, and it's something that certainly we are very committed to trying to achieve. Now, at the moment, we know we have a network which is effectively dominated by a small number of players. We've got BT Openreach, the big provider, very large, been around for a very, very long time indeed, or BT certainly has, with some other players there, Virgin Media covering about 50% of the country, and in terms of the regulatory environment, one small provider, KCOM in Hull, and Ofcom sitting there trying to make sure there's a sort of level playing field and things work in a fairly even-handed sort of way. But that's all changing. The costs, as we've been discussing, of rolling out next generation broadband are such that it's really beyond the capacity right now of the private sector in the shape of BT on its own, or Virgin Media on its own, to go the full distance. And so what we're seeing is a change from that sort of picture today to much more of a patchwork quilt of different types of organisations and providers emerging around the country. And this is not a complete list. There are people on this platform who are not actually on that list at the moment. They damn well should be, but they're not. But this is a list of projects that we know about which are either starting, have started, are being developed, being thought about all over the country, and they're being driven by a whole range of different players. Public sector organisations, private sector organisations, and we've heard from some of those today, and communities themselves working to make something happen in their areas. So it's quite a vibrant and changing picture that we're seeing, and this patchwork quilt I think gives a great opportunity to learn what works best where. Not everything works in the same way. Most of those projects are driven for very, very different reasons, with different partners in them and different perspectives. So we can learn a lot about what works where, and we can take that learning into different parts of the country, into here in Cumbria, in order to ensure that we get the fastest possible rollout of next generation broadband. And amongst those types of projects, there are a number of examples, I think, which are worth touching upon. And the first one of those doesn't actually come from the UK at all. This is from Sweden. The area of Skellefteå in very, very rural North Sweden. It's a community of about 70,000 people, 10 people per square kilometre. So this is a very, very rural community indeed. But yet 80% of the households in that area have fibre connections. And how have they done that? They've done that by working with a local utility company and dividing up the labour. So the utility company, in terms of being able to roll out services, dig trenches, put fibre in those trenches, light that fibre, organise the provision of services, can do one part of it. The community itself has to do another part, and that's all about trying to facilitate the process of investment. And I think we can learn a lot from these types of examples. It's not just here that we have these sorts of problems, but there are ways of addressing these problems which are based around the creativity and the commitment of all of us in our communities around the country. The second example I want to give is from North Wales. We heard from Chris Medley of Geo earlier today. And one of their projects, one of their most exciting projects, I think, is not that far away from here. It's in North Wales, and it's the Fibre Speed project. And in this case, this is a partnership project between the Welsh Assembly Government and Geo as a private sector company in order to provide fibre connections into business parks in North Wales, which previously struggled to get affordable broadband, high-speed broadband services into those areas. And by creating this partnership approach, where the risk and the rewards are being shared between the private sector and the public sector, they managed to connect 14 of the business parks up, start providing services into those business parks to the people in those parks on an open access basis, so they choose their service providers, to support the economic growth of the area and ensure that people have access to services at the same price as they would pay in the southeast, for instance. So I think this is a very interesting example of how the public sector and the private sector are working together right now in order to deliver next generation broadband services in North Wales. And the third example is from South Yorkshire, the South Yorkshire Digital Region, which is a public sector-led project which looked at the region and came to the conclusion that without starting to invest in next generation broadband, their area would suffer from further economic decline, and that's what they didn't want to see happening. So they've invested public sector funding in order to put fibre connections to many, many thousands of exchanges throughout the area, throughout that sub-region, connecting up to 500,000 people in that area to ensure that they will enjoy next generation broadband services as quickly as possible. So those are three different types of example of approaches that are being taken to address the problem, which are not simply relying on one large provider to do the job for you. Now, my organisation, the Independent Networks Cooperative Association, has been set up in order to bring together many of these types of initiatives under one umbrella, to organise or to work on the problem of ensuring there are common standards so that the issue of having isolated islands of connectivity doesn't exist, to look at the development of common services between them, and to promote the whole sector and to engage with audiences like this and discuss how these projects can be relevant right throughout the country. We organise conferences, and we have a conference coming up quite soon, so I very much hope to see lots of you there, and we can talk about progress that's been made in Cumbria and Penrith in the intervening 2 or 3 months. So I hope to see you in November. I would say finally that the key message I think that I'm taking out of today is that there is a huge amount of energy in this room, in the population of Cumbria, in order to solve this problem. And what we have here on this platform are many of the people who are working extremely hard at the level of their community in order to make that change and make that difference. And I think this is going to be hugely valuable. Thank you very much.